My name is Dr. Janelle Ott. I teach double reeds at Angelo State University and bassoon at Abilene Christian and McMurray Universities in Abilene, Texas. I am making this video primarily for my college students in case they need a refresher on how to process cane from tube cane, but anyone needing a refresher is more than welcome to watch this video as well. Okay, so we're starting out with tube cane. This is what you buy from the stores. And before I go any further, I'm just going to tell you that everything that I do, there's somebody out there who's doing it differently, I promise. Bassoon reed making is a very individualized process. So if somebody's told you to do something different, that's perfectly legitimate. Okay, so the first thing that we do when we get tube cane, notice I have mine labeled. This happens to be Donzi, and the cane was purchased in 2019. That's what the 19 means. And the D, I label all of my cane because I use many different kinds of cane, and I've found that every brand of cane has its own personality, so I really like to know what I'm dealing with when I'm making the reed. The first thing that we're going to do is split the tube. So there are many different ways to do this. One way to do it is to use a radius gauge. Another way to do it is to lay the tube flat on the table, rotate it, and try to find the place that is the straightest. What I'm going to do today is I'm actually going to divide my cane looking for a bud or the bud. So the bud is when we have a piece of cane that grows. What we actually have is it comes across in the center. Imagine a blade of grass that's folding in the middle. And where that fold happens, the density of the cane is just a little bit different from the rest of the cane. We don't want that in the middle of a reed, so we try to put it on the end of the reed. Now, the cane that I have in my personal collection tends to be pretty even, so it's not always super easy to find the bud. If that's the case, it's probably going to be a good piece of cane. We're trying to take something that naturally is not straight and it's not symmetrical, and we're trying to make it straight and symmetrical. So just keep in mind that not every piece of cane is going to become a reed, and that's all right. Some pieces of cane are just going to be a little bit too crooked to work well. So, okay, bud. So on this first piece of cane, I think that this is probably the bud here, because you can see there's just a little indentation. There's also a crack. That's, if the cane is ever cracked, that's a good place to look. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to assume that right there is the bud. So I'll set my bassoon cane on a tabletop, a stable tabletop, and I take a standard issue box cutter. Could also use a reed knife. I don't like to use X-Acto blades because the blade is so thin you lose control of what you're doing. So notice I'm holding the cane on the sides. I'm keeping my fingers well away from the path of this X-Acto blade. I'm setting it up exactly where I want to cut, and then I'm applying some pressure, but I'm also rocking the blade back and forth. It's more of a rocking motion than a pushing motion. And as I go down the tube, I just keep rocking until I get the entire thing split. So there's the split. Now for the other side of the tube, I like to split all my bassoon cane into 4 pieces. Some people do 3, I do 4. So it's easy to find. You just line up the blade, go all the way across the cut, and try to find something that is on the other side. So again, holding the cane on the sides, my fingers are not anywhere near the path of the box cutter. Setting up the box cutter so it is straight against the blade. It's not at an angle, it's just straight up and down. And applying some pressure, but more than that, I'm rocking the blade side to side, like so. Then we cut it in half. So again, Fingers on the sides, not anywhere near the blade. Set up the blade perpendicular to the cane. Apply some downward pressure and rock side to side, like so. Notice I get my fingers out of the way as soon as I possibly can. Sometimes you'll lose control of the blade when you're doing this step. And then the last step, okay, the next thing I do is I label all of the cane so I know what I'm dealing with. I like to put the label in the middle because the middle of the piece of cane is going to stay with you all the way until you profile it. So you'll have to relabel when you profile it, but otherwise the label is safe and you don't have to do it again. Let's do one more piece of cane. So in this case, looking for the bud, I think right away that the bud is probably right here. And the reason for that is you can see there's a ridge on the inside of the tube cane. This is not always going to be the case. And if you look carefully, there's ridges all the way around the tube cane. But right away, that one particular ridge is jumping out at me, being a little bit more distinct than everything else around it. Now, if we examine the cane a little bit more, we can see on the other side, so this side is where I noticed the ridge. There is a really distinct line on the outside, right there. And that's the equivalent of where I saw the ridge on the other side. So we're gonna go with that as being the bud. So again, keep your fingers on the side, line up the knife and push. But more important than pushing is a back and forth rocking motion that will split the cane right down the end like that. Other things to keep in mind while you're splitting cane. So I usually just look for the bud and move forward from there. You are trying to come up with the 4 most symmetrical pieces that you can. So when you're lining up where you're going to start, try to bisect into something that looks the same on both sides of the cane. Okay. So I like to split a whole bunch of cane at once and then just keep it in a bag that says gouge next. I have that bag with me. Let me show you really quickly. There you go. The idea is to set up a pipeline. So you're not doing everything at any one point and you always have some backup cane no matter what. Now, we're going to go straight from splitting to gouging. For most of my education, I was taught that you need to soak the cane that you're gouging overnight. And then in my doctorate, I stopped doing that. So, as I said earlier, there's always more than one way to make cane, make reeds. At any point in time, you're going to find something that somebody disagrees with me about. If you're going to soak the cane, it needs to be a long soak. I'm talking overnight or preferably 24 hours. And the idea is that the longer you soak, the more times you soak the cane, the less time you need to soak it. The first time you soak the cane, the water is going to be pretty gross. The second time that you soak it, there will be a lot less sediment in the water, and so on and so forth. We're conditioning the cane over time to need less and less time to soak. Okay, So I have two gougers here. One of them is my personal gouger, and the other one is the gouger that belongs to Angelo State. I want to show you how to use both of them. Notice that I'm clamping both gougers into place. They will work a lot better. Your life will be much easier, and you'll be able to gouge a lot faster if they're clamped down. So with my personal gouger, this is a Reeds and Stuff gouger, or yeah, Reeds and Stuff. It came with these clamps, and you can use this this particular tool that came with it to tighten the clamps. With the School's Profiler, which I think is probably, it's an RDG. I just bought some C-clamps from the hardware store. Okay, so with both of these, we have guillotines. The guillotines are designed to cut the blade to length so that your reed is going to be the length we want the finished reed to be. I usually clip mine to be 120 millimeters. I think that's pretty standard for most machines. So on this one, you can see there's a guide where if I wanted to move this guide further forward or further back, I could. I've got it set pretty much right at 120. This one is set where it is. This is just how the machine came to me. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try to take this piece of cane that I cut to hopefully be kind of symmetrical, and I want to find the most symmetrical part of the cane. So I have the straightest possible piece of cane. So there are, again, many ways to do this. One way that people will do it is they'll just take their tabletop, or I'm going to just use this box. Hold on. Here's a drying rack I have. So they'll just lay the cane on the table and try to see where it fits the best, or they'll turn it the other way and just see how flat this cane is laying on the table. So like here, I would probably get rid of this side of the cane. As a general rule of thumb, if you're not sure what to do, you should take at least a little bit of cane off of both sides, both ends, because the ends of the cane are going to be the least straight part of the cane. What I like to do is I'll hold the cane up like so and kind of try to see where the angle of one side of the cane against the other changes. So in this case, you can see that on this side, the cane is lower than on that side. So I'm going to actually take some cane off of this side right here. Never try to take all of the cane off when you're cutting it. Take off some of the cane and then re-evaluate. So we're going to do this one on the RDG gouger. I'm going to line it up. So if I wanted to cut it straight to length, I would put it all the way in the bed, but I'm not going to do that right now. I'm going to put it partway in the bed. Check again. I'm going to take just a little bit off this side. And the rest off of this side again. Now, I'll usually cut a whole bunch of pieces of cane to length. I'll cut it all first and then I will gouge it. We're just going to do this one as a dummy. So notice that I've got padding underneath the blade. There's also a dummy piece of cane in the blade. And the reason for that is because if there's enough underneath the blade and something bad happens, let's say something gets dropped on the gouger or somebody hits this part really hard, it's going to protect the blade from actually breaking. The blades are expensive. You have to special order them and it takes a while to get them. So whenever possible, you should have the blade facing down and with something to stop the blade from hitting the bed. Okay, I'm gonna take out the dummy piece of cane. So on the RDG gouger, the way you do it is you pull back this lever, and then you're going to pick up the other lever with your other hand. So I'll often do it with my hand, like just the heel of my hand. You can grab it with your thumb too. Just make sure you grab towards the back. Take out the piece of cane. Put the piece of cane back in. Try to get it as straight as possible. And then we're going to take the gouger blade, grab the handle, put the gouger blade back down in the middle of the cane, like so. Now, without leaving the cane but not pushing down, you're going to pull the gouger blade all the way back and applying some pressure, light pressure, you're going to push forward. And it's really normal at first that you're not going to get a lot of cane. Once you start gouging, you don't want the gouger blade to leave the cane, but you're not pushing down when you go backwards. You're only applying pressure when you go forwards. So push hard enough so that it stays in contact with the reed, but not so hard that you're trying to take any cane off. The cutting edge only works in this direction. Now, once we've gotten to the point where we're taking entire strips off, you can start to apply a little bit more force on the forward motion. Notice I'm trying to keep the curls off of the bed. Sometimes I'll remove them by hand and sometimes they just sort of fly off on their own. Okay, so now we're getting to the point where it's not really cutting anymore. So I like to flip the cane around just to make sure, because often what you'll find is it'll gouge a little bit thinner on one side instead of on the other side. And there you go, there's just like a little bit more. Okay. Now, at this point, if you have a handheld dial indicator, you can check the measurements of the cane to make sure it's thin enough. The cane should be pretty uniform, so I will take the handheld dial indicator and check it here, in the middle, and at the end. Ask your teacher how thick it's supposed to be gouged, and keep in mind that the measurement may be in millimeters or inches. I personally don't currently have a handheld dial indicator. I do have a set of calipers that I use to check the cane periodically, but I'm not going to do it on every single piece like I used to. Just check and make sure that it looks roughly the same thickness on both sides. You don't want one side to be super thin. If one side is almost down to the bark, maybe throw it away. So that's how you use the RDG gouger. It's a good idea to have some kind of paintbrush or toothbrush to keep the reed shavings off of the equipment, and especially off of the blade. Once you're done, if you didn't soak the cane before you started, if you only were using dry cane, there's not really a need to oil the gouger. If you soaked your cane, you need to oil the gouger, the blade, and all moving parts. The oil is going to stop water from collecting on the blade or any moving metal parts, and that will prevent rust. My teacher at UNT would use mineral oil. I have a specialty mixed blend that was made by the instrument repair person at UNT. I don't remember exactly what it is, but I trust Ann McMillan with my life, so I use it. And you just put a little bit on the top of the blade, like so. Anything that moves, you try to get a little bit there. And I'll put a little bit of oil on the guillotine as well. Then move it up and down. Just try to get some motion happening. Okay, now if you're done with the gouger, you get rid of all of the shavings and put it back in its box. It shouldn't be just staying out for anyone to like knock over or fall onto or, you know, knock off the shelf. But for now, we're going to go straight over to my personal gouger, which I love. I have found that this gouger is a little bit more finicky than the RDG or the Rieger gougers, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. If this gouger is rejecting cane, it's usually because it's not very flat, it's not very straight, and it probably wouldn't make a good reed. So the downside is that instead of having clips like the RDG gouger does, the Reeds and Things gouger has this movable, move the carriage a little bit so you can see, it's got this movable clamp here. So you have to unscrew and rescrew this clamp for every piece of cane you gouge. So let's look at this piece of cane, and just looking at it straight away, I see there's a bulge right there. I'm not sure if you can see it or not. If you look at the reed from this angle, you can see there's a little bit here where it's falling back. If you do the tabletop, you can see there's quite a bit of wiggle room here. It's rocking quite a bit from one side to the other side. So I'm going to probably do a compromise. I like this side of the cane better than this side of the cane, so I'm going to get rid of more of this side and less of this side. This piece is crooked enough it might not even sit in the gouger bed. So we're going to try it and see what happens. So unscrew it, place the reed right up against the far guide, rescrew it. And again, at first we're not applying a lot of pressure. We're just getting the first couple shavings off, and they're pretty small because what we're doing is we're getting the cane to be the same thickness all the way around. Right now there are pieces that are sticking out. I like to use two hands when I'm gouging because I feel like it gives me a little bit more control. Believe it or not, after you do 20 pieces of this, your arms will start to hurt if you're old like I am. And then we check the other side. Good enough. Now some people will sand the inside of the cane at this point. I certainly used to do that when I was using school-owned instruments, and I'd recommend you do that on the RDG. I found that the Reeds and Stuff, I'm sorry, I'm so bad with names. My gouger is so smooth that I don't really feel the need to sand the inside of the cane anymore, but I'll probably do it on this one. Okay, the next step is to prepare for shaping, and there's going to be another video about shaping. Before you shape, you soak the cane for at least 12 hours or 24. Definitely at least overnight. So that's where we'll pick up in the next video.